everybody. We are back with another live video today. This is our first hands-on science demonstration, and I have some helpers here with me ready to do our hands-on science demonstration. My name is Eileen. I'm the Environmental Education Coordinator at LGRO, Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds. And since we are a watershed organization, our demonstration today is going to be about watersheds. So we're going to have another couple of cool experiments coming up in the coming weeks, but I thought that I wanted to share with you one of the first activities that I usually do when I go into a classroom. And this is an activity that we normally do with students anywhere from 4th through 8th grade. But as you can see, I've got some younger students here with me. I've got a preschooler, I've got a 1st grader, and a 4th grader. So you can scale this activity up or down depending on the age level of the student that you have working with you. We are coming to you live from my front porch, and there's a lot of birds outside. The sunshine is beautiful today. Hopefully you can hear me over the birds. Now, part of the reason I wanted to do this experiment outside with you is because there's water involved, and anytime I do that, it's just nice to have an area around that it's okay if it gets a little bit wet. So, Liv, can I put you down for just a second here? You can come back in a minute. So, if you want to follow along with us at home, we've got 5th, 7th, and 9th graders showing on. Hi, Tara, good to see you. So, if you want to follow along at home and do this activity along with me, I'm going to go through this materials that you need. And if you want to just watch the video and do it later, I'm going to post instructions to it along with the video after we're done here. So the most important thing that you need is a spray bottle. Most of you probably have a spray bottle at home, but if you don't, you can use just a regular, like a paper cup or a plastic cup. And what you can see here is I poked a bunch of holes in the bottom. And so what this does is it produces kind of like a little rain cloud that's going to rain on your activity here. Now I'm going to show you a couple of different options for how to build this model. One option, sorry, it's going to get loud a second. I got some, yeah, you can help. I'm just showing them all the materials. So one option is to use a paint tray and to build your model inside the paint tray. Anybody from my class here know why I might want to use a paint tray for building my model?
Put the water in?
And what's the water going to do on the paint tray?
Go down?
Yeah, so the paint tray is nice because the water will flow downhill and it gives you a little bit of a natural flow. So I like to use these if I can. This is just from the dollar store. The other option, sprinkle, is to use like a 9x13 pan, or just like if you have any of these aluminum or foil pans. And that'll just, all that does is it holds the water that we're going to use so that it doesn't go everywhere. So if you're in your kitchen or at your table and you don't want water on the floor, you can use this. So let me kind of move my things around a little bit. So to make your actual watershed yourself, you're going to use either a piece of aluminum foil, which I already have pulled off here, or a piece of wax paper, or I want to make sure you have the materials you need because maybe you can't go out and get them. The other option, sometimes I like to do this in a classroom, is I have a piece of like an old plastic tablecloth that I got at the dollar store. I chose a green one because it looks like land. And what you can do is build some topography using stuff you have around your house. So like, let me pull off my materials from the side here. Like say you have old Cool Whip containers, or you might have, let me see, you might have like a bunch of papers from your kids' like math problems lying around that you can crumple up and put in your pan and lay your plastic over top of, kind of like topography. So I'm going to demonstrate. Do each of you, maybe one of you want to use this and one of you want to use the paint tray?
Oh, can I use the paint?
Oh, okay, awesome. All right, so let me get my stuff out of the way here. My girls are going to help me out here doing the demonstration.
Can I use the pan?
If you want to use the pan, you're going to go over with Evelyn and help her, okay? Why don't you go stand by her? Hang on. Sorry, just getting my class organized here. Okay. So, the first thing you'll do, take that away, is take your thing that you're building your model in, hold it in front of you. Now, I have a worksheet that I like to use with my students that I'll post a link to. It's at greatlakesLessons.com, and it's called What is a Watershed? How to Build a Watershed Model. And this is really useful. If I was in a classroom, I would have students following along with this, and I might have my girls do some work on this as well. So what we're going to do is build a model of a watershed, and then we're going to use that model to explain what a watershed is. So starting out with the models can be built in this little area here. The first thing I want you to do is to build some topography. Evelyn, do you know what topography is?
Topography is like bumps and stuff in the land.
Yeah, so she said it's bumps and stuff in the land. It's the hills and the valleys and the land. So since you're using this, I want you to take these materials and build some bumps and stuff in the land. Put them in there how you want. You can actually use this too if you want to use that to make some different topography.
What do I use?
I'll show you this. Okay. And then put them on there how you want, and then lay your land over top and kind of tuck it in so that you can see. So you can see on her, she's got, let me move my things of water out of the way so you can see. You can see she's got some hills and ridges here in her little tray. May, what you're going to do is you're going to show a different way that we can do this. So please take your piece of aluminum foil. This is going to be loud because it's going to crinkle. Crinkle it up a second. Just kind of go like that. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Now we're going to spread it out a little bit. Oh, I pulled it apart. And what I want you to do is put it in your pan and make some hills and valleys. So you want it to be, maybe you'll have like a little bit of a hill, a little bit of a valley. So what you can see on hers is we just have kind of this crinkled up piece of foil in here. And I'm actually going to add a little more foil so she can fill her pan a little bit more, because that makes kind of a better example. So kind of stick that not too low. You want to have some hills in there. All right, so what we have here is two different landscapes. Yeah, don't make it too low because otherwise you're not going to be able to see. So this is just two different ways you can do the exact same kind of demonstration. So we've got two different landscapes. Now, this is where you pull out the next thing that you need, which is some washable markers. Now, it's very important that the markers you use for this are washable, as you'll see in a moment. Evelyn, what color do you want? It needs to be a dark color. Purple. Okay. Evelyn's going to use purple. May, what color do you want? Dark color.
Dark green.
She's going to use dark blue. Now, each of you girls find the highest points on your model here and put an X on those points.
It's going to be harder for me.
Find some more high. If there's more than one high point, put an X on it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you can just color it. Yeah. Now, the next thing I want you to do, once you found all your high points, is find your lowest point on your map and either color that with another shape or just a little dot.
Can I use another color?
If you want to use another color, you can do that. So if you're following along, if later on you want to do this and you use this worksheet, it has the instructions on how to do each of those things while you go. The next part of this activity is that you need to make some predictions. So on the back side of our sheet, we have this place where students can make a prediction about what they think is going to happen. We don't need to write this down. You can just tell me, May, what do you think is going to happen when it rains on your model?
It's going to wash off. The marker's going to wash off.
Oh, she thinks the marker's going to wash off. Evelyn, what do you think is going to happen? Where's the water going to go?
I think the water's going to go to the deepest point because the hills are all going to slope down to the deepest point, and it's all going to go to the deepest point.
Okay, she said the hills are going to slope down to the deepest point, and she thinks the water is going to flow down to that deepest point. Why would the water flow down to that deep point, you think? Oh, yes, May. You can raise their hands. I'm a good teacher.
Because if it lands on here, it's a slope, so it will fall down.
Yeah, it's a slope, so it will fall down. Does anybody know?
Like a sled.
Like a sled, exactly. What is that force that causes things to go downhill?
Friction.
Not friction. Starts with a G.
Geography.
Geography. Well, sort of. Have you heard of anything called gravity?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, gravity. So gravity causes that water to flow downhill. So the next activity, Lydia, this is where your preschoolers can come in. I need your help here. Lydia is going to be our rain cloud. So I'll get out of the way here. You come into the middle, and we're going to have a thunderstorm happen. Now take your water. Now, if you're using a spray bottle, make sure that you have it on like, I don't know if you can see that, like spray mode and not on stream mode. You want it to simulate actual rain falling on your land. So go ahead and spray. If you're following along, you can spray yours as well.
I was right.
And as you're spraying it, spray all over. Observe what's happening. So if you're following along, you're doing this activity at home, I want you to write down or write in the comments what you see happening as you spray. Now, everybody obviously wants to spray. So we're going to take turns. Lydia's going to spray 5 more sprays. Okay, now May's going to have a turn to spray.
Can I spray on Evie? No.
Well, why don't you spray on your own and Evelyn will spray on her model. Lydia, what do you see happening on this model?
The water's going down into the deepest point.
The water is going down into the deepest point.
And it's changing color.
And it's changing color. Interesting. Okay. Could you share with Evelyn now? Let's see what happens on her side. So this is just a little bit. You can see a little how it looks differently on the different models. So while she's spraying, I'll give you a little example of what May's looks like here. You can see kind of the color in the little hills here. Okay. Now, first I want you to look at your model. Tell me some things that you observed about what happened. Oh, wait, before I do that, I just want to show you if you're using a cup, how that might look. So if you've got a cup that has holes in it, you can fill it up and you get
it's actually like
a little bit of a rainstorm. This cup has kind of small holes, so I don't like to use it because it comes out kind of slow. But you can kind of shake it, maybe make bigger holes in the bottom of your cup than I did, and that will help you get a little bit of rain on there as well. Yeah, so we're noticing some water puddling in crevices, going from the highest to the lowest point. What are some observations that you girls made on yours? What do you see? May?
when it hit the marker, the water changed.
So she noticed when it hit the marker, the water changed. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. What did you notice about where the water went? Yes.
On the big hill where it's flat on the top, it kind of gathered, but like on these hills, it's not really flat on the top, so it just went down to my valley.
Yeah. So what do you think might represent these valleys where the water is puddled?
Valleys.
Well, what
Rivers.
real life feature? Yeah. So some of us had some rivers where the water was kind of flowing, and then there's some areas where there's little ponds. Yeah. And you get actual little puddles or ponds. Kind of interesting on Evelyn's. I don't know if you can see. I'll try to scoot it a little closer. She had this Cool Whip container as one of her topography features here. And so we see that the bottom of the Cool Whip container had a little dip in it and water gathered there. So yeah, that might be a lake. That might be a pond.
This is my river.
Yeah, and that's her. So Evie's got a river down here. May's got a pond. Now, did anybody notice anything about the color of their water as you sprayed? Did you notice anything? I'm curious. What did you notice, May?
The water hit the marker and the marker slid off, causing the water to change color.
The water slid off, causing the marker. Sorry, what did it say? The water slid off the marker, and the marker caused the water to change color. Yeah, so the marker could be like pollution. What kinds of things could be pollution in the watershed?
Boots.
Boots? If you leave your dirty boots outside and they get thrown on the ground and washed into a lake, maybe.
Gas.
Evie said gas. What were you going to say?
Like milk jugs and cans.
So trash could be on the ground. Boots
are trash.
This is a type of pollution that is called non-point source pollution. So let's see. We've got 3rd, 6th, and 7th graders watching. Hi, guys. Non-point source pollution is anything that gets picked up in that runoff water. Now, I sometimes will do, if you have around your house, maybe some like baking stuff that you are willing to part with, you could get out, you could get out like some cocoa, you could get out some sprinkles, and you could put those things on there to represent different types of pollution that might be in the watershed. Sometimes I'll take out food coloring and I'll use that as an example. So let's use maize. And let's say that on this watershed, we'll pretend like our house is up here at the top of the hill. And maybe we want to have really, really green grass. And so we put some fertilizer on our grass. And that just sits up here. But we didn't read the instructions, so we used a lot of fertilizer. And then let's say I change the oil in my car, and I didn't decide to clean it up. I just threw it on the driveway. People do that? That's gross. And it's over here. Or you could say,
why is our house right there and our cars over there?
Hang on. Well, this is a different person's car. It's not our car. Maybe it's at work. I don't know. Or another example could be maybe I had some cleaning chemicals in my home that I didn't need anymore. And so I dumped them down a storm drain. Should never dump anything down storm drains, right, guys?
Yes.
What goes in storm drains? Water, only rain. These girls are trained. They know the answer. So if we have it rain again, while we have this pollution on the ground, let's see what happens. So if you have stuff at home you want to put on there, you could do that as well. Whoa. Wait, you're on stream mode. Okay, spray again. You want it to look like rain.
Can I try too? Oh no.
So Evelyn's going to put some pollution on her watershed and see it spread.
I don't want to put pollution on.
Oh, what are you putting on?
Pollution.
All right, so you can see on here, as we added some of those things onto the landscape and then we sprayed again, they went into our watershed. So if you look at this, you might notice, in a minute, you might notice that you have more than one lake, you might have more than one pond, more than one river. And what that means is that you have multiple watersheds on your model, which is really cool. So what can you tell me about how you could define, can we save this until the video's done and you can do another one? Sorry, we're doing this live at home with everybody's trying to participate. So how would you define a watershed based on what we've learned today?
That's sad. My lake's black.
Evelyn's lake is black because she put a lot of pollution in there. So Evelyn's got these really high points all around the edges, and then she has a big lake in the middle. So her watershed is the lake, but it's also all that land around the lake that's draining into it. Yeah, don't put that right in front so they can see. So she had, you can't see because it's so tall. I don't want to dump it out. So she has a watershed that has some really high ridges along the edges. May's watershed is a little bit flatter, maybe a little bit more representative of what Michigan looks like. So watershed is that area of land that drains into a common body of water. So I want you to look at your model. See how many watersheds do you have? Do you have one watershed? Is it all kind of draining into one body of water? Maybe you have multiple watersheds where you're draining into multiple lakes, rivers, or ponds or streams on your model there. And the other thing that you could see from this demonstration is that what we put on the ground can get washed away in the rain and enter into that watershed and cause pollution of the water. Now, some of our people who are following along have noticed that the more you spray, the lighter the color gets. And that phenomenon is called dilution. Now, we recognize that dilution does mean that there's less stuff, sort of parts per million in the water, but it's not a good solution to pollution. You ever heard that? The solution to pollution is not dilution. We want to have less pollution going into the water. And so another extension to this activity that you could do is to look at ways that we could try to stop that pollution from getting into the water. And some of you who are following along, I know who you are. I know that you guys have done cool things, maybe at your school property, maybe at your home, to try to stop pollution from entering into the Grand River and some of its tributaries. So if you have ideas of things you could do, you could put them in the comments. I think that would be interesting. I'm going to see if these guys can come up with any ideas. What are some ways, guys, that you think we could stop pollution from entering our waterways in your models here with the rain?
Don't use the stuff that you used.
Don't use the stuff that you used? What kind of stuff?
Like the fertilizer.
Oh, like the fertilizer. So you can use fertilizer, but you should not use too much, right? Because if you have too much, that's when it washes off. What was your idea, May?
When you're fishing and you have your worm can, don't just leave it on the ground.
Oh, don't leave your worm can on the ground.
Wash into the lake or something that you're fishing.
Yeah, so don't leave litter out. Don't leave trash out.
Pick up your oil.
Dispose of it properly. So things like used oil or household chemicals, those are called household hazardous waste. And if you dump that stuff into a storm drain or into the water, that can cause pollution in the water. Oh, there it is. I knew I was waiting for that example. We have some schools in our watershed who have done some awesome things. They have planted native plants and they have planted something called a rain garden. Do you guys know what a rain garden is?
A rain garden is when all the water flows into the garden and then the plants soak it up.
These girls are so lucky to have me as a mom, aren't they? They learned all these amazing things from me. So yes, a rain garden is a special type of garden that you can funnel your runoff water into that will soak up all the water. The plants have special long, deep roots that will soak up pollution. So we're gonna pretend like these sponges here are rain gardens in our watershed. And these are going to be rain gardens that are planted with native plants. That means it's a plant that is adapted to grow in this area. May's plants are going to be yellow. These plants are going to be green. So we're using a sponge. Why do you think we're using a sponge to represent them?
Soak in.
Yeah, it can soak in. What else could a sponge represent in the watershed besides a rain garden? Maybe something that's natural, a type of ecosystem.
The sun?
Not the sun.
It's spongy?
It is spongy. So sponges can also represent something maybe like a wetland in your watershed that can help soak up some of that water. So let's say, okay, here's my house up high on this ridge here where I put all that fertilizer, but I planted this really giant rain garden next to my lawn to catch all my runoff. And what you can see, I'll try to scoot a little bit closer, is that if I start squirting, and I've got this rain garden here, you can see that I'm trying not to spray my computer screen. You can see that the rain garden starts to soak up some of that pollution. And one thing you notice, and I'll show you my sponge up close, you can see is it not only soaked up water, but you see that green mark on there. It's actually soaking up some of that. Oh my goodness, that's a lot. It actually soaks up some of that pollution as well.
My lake.
Yeah, that's a very polluted watershed that she's got over there. So yes, planting a rain garden, planting native plants, that helps return our ecosystems to some of their more natural ways of functioning. So water is soaking into the ground instead of running off across all of our paved surfaces into storm drains and into rivers and streams and taking pollution with it. So if I was doing this in a classroom, we're kind of outside, we're sort of like loosely schooling here, so I'm not making them fill this worksheet out, but some of the questions that I would ask students are to say, could you draw an elevation map of your model? So look at your model from the side, and this is maybe a good activity if you've got older students who are following along. If you look at kind of the shape of your model, could you draw an elevation map here? This is a really good opportunity to start talking about how to read a topographic map, how to read maps in general. There's a really cool activity by an organization called Project WET, W-E-T. And if you go to projectwet.org/COVID-19, they have a bunch of free resources right now. And one of them is an activity that's called Seeing Watersheds. And that has a variation of this modeling activity in there, but it also has some resources for reading maps and learning how to delineate watersheds that are appropriate for more like 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade students. So I would ask students maybe if they would draw me an elevation map. I would ask them to write down some of their observations, maybe do some further research. So now that you know what a watershed is, that it's that area of land that drains to a common body of water, I would say maybe you could go do some research on your local watershed. Do you know what watershed you live in? I know that the Parkside students who are following along here know what watershed they live in. It's part of the Grand River watershed, but it has a sub-watershed. It's a river that goes into the Grand River. So we'll see if they chime in a minute with what their actual watershed is. We here live in the Thornapple River watershed, which is part of the Grand River. And if you want to know which watershed you live in, go to our website, www.lgrow.org, and click on the watershed tab. And we have a map. You can type in your address and find out which watershed you live in. So have your kids do some further research into their watershed, find out what's special about it, what its issues are, because not all watersheds have the same issues, and then report back to me on what you learned. I would love it if you would share with, oh, there it is, Rogue River Watershed. I knew they knew it. And some of the questions that you can have them do as follow-up are talking about explaining how the water flowed over your model, what caused the water to flow the way it did. And then especially if you want to hone in on learning about that scientific process, I didn't have them do it too intensely here, but have them make a prediction before they start spraying and then talk about how your watershed model did or did not bear out the prediction that you made. And then they could write a little report about it, do some claim, evidence, reasoning, all those good science standards kind of stuff. If you have questions about watersheds that you would like me to answer, please feel free to drop them in the comments or send us a message. I would love to help you out. As you can see, even for younger kids, hours of fun with this spray bottle. You can use all different types of materials to represent different types of pollutants on the landscape. Other ways you could do this model that might be really fun. I used to do this with a big tarp that I would put outside, and I would put it over top of like chairs and rocks and stuff that I found. And then you can have a whole bunch of people standing around it and multiple sprayers at once. So if you had a whole class or a larger group or a big family, I guess we're not gathering in large groups right now, but if you had a big family and you all wanted to stand around and spray, you could do that. You could also, can you just stop for just a second because it's a little bit loud. You can also build a watershed in your sandbox. So dig out little streams and rivers and ponds in your sandbox and see how water flows there. It's really fun to watch how water flows across the landscape and how it can start to shape the landscape itself. So our next activity that we're going to be doing next Wednesday, if you want to follow along, is a little bit more advanced, more of like a 6th, 7th, 8th grade level activity. My kids will obviously still be here with me following along, but just as a FYI, it involves 3 pop bottles, soda bottles, 2 liters. So if you have any of those that you want to rescue out of your recycling bin this week, go ahead and do that. Or if you need to like add some 2 liters to your next grocery order and then quick chug them down, go ahead and do that before next week so that you can follow around where we're going to talk a little bit more about soil and about how that influences the way that water moves in our watershed. So thank you so much for following along, learning about what watersheds are and how water moves through them. I hope that we'll see you again at our next demonstration next week, where we're going to talk about soil and runoff and how plants, that we talked a little bit about rain gardens today, but we're going to talk a little bit more about plants and how those plants play a role in the watershed. I have a question from the 4-year-old over here. What's your question?
The water is only green when she put her hand in because she had a little bit of green stuff on her.
Yeah, the water turned green when she put her hand in because she had green stuff in it. So more hands-on science to come every Wednesday during the school closures. And then next on Friday, we will be doing a really fun craft where we're going to be making fish sock puppets. So if you have any socks that have not yet been sacrificed as toilet paper, save them in order to do the craft next week. I'll post the materials you need for that, and then follow along with us on Mondays for story time for your younger kids. So it was great to see you. Please post any questions or comments you have and follow along with us next week. It was so fun to see you guys. Thanks.